Great. Well, I get to introduce Craig Wilson today. Craig does not need a long introduction because you're going to get to know him over the course of the next 45 minutes.
Most of us haven't done anything.
There's actually an inverse correlation between the length of someone's intro and what they've done. So the shorter the intro, the more you know the person. Craig and I first met several years ago when one of his sons was working at a boys ranch that I was helping work at too. And another one of his sons was a camper at that same boys ranch. And so that's where we met, and that's where I was introduced to some of the ideas that you're going to hear today. One of the most entrepreneurial things that Craig has done is created a course that he has taught at BYU, the University of Utah Institute, Ensign College, UVU, several different schools over the years, and has really honed in on the science and the art of happiness and how to live a happy life. And there really is research around this, which you'll get into today. So I'm really excited for this message because I believe that it really matters. Craig was born in Seattle. He has an amazing wife and 5 great kids between the ages of 28 and 19 who are all still eligible. Is that true?
One of them's kind of...
Okay, all right.
She knows her guy.
Okay, so 4 of the 5.
Yes.
Sorry. And Craig is an amazing golfer. Some of his hobbies include mountaineering, marathons, journaling and reading, travel, teaching happiness principles, and mentoring. So please welcome Craig Wilson.
Okay, first of all, I'm the least known person that's ever walked up here. The company I said was CCW Enterprises. I'm the only one that knows it. It's just a place to house assets that actually pay you money and an increase in value. And partly because if you get sued, if everything's in your name, you can lose it all. If you're smart, you kind of parcel it out in different kinds of companies or LLCs, and one's called CCW Enterprises. Other than that, I really haven't done a whole lot from an entrepreneurial standpoint, at least for profit. I have been involved in nonprofits, and so that's called social entrepreneurship, and that's actually how Russ and I met. I got involved with a couple of people that cared about something, and put them both together, and they formed a ranch, and the ranch did some good things for a while. And I got to meet people like Russ, just amazing, really amazing. Maybe we'll be getting happy to be around people like that. My first question is, have you ever been compelled, deeply compelled to do something that maybe is outside of yourself? Maybe you felt like it came from another place, and you just have to do it, no matter what. And I see some heads shaking. One thought, what did you have to do? What was it? Yeah. You felt compelled somehow to do it? An inspiring spot, like you needed to? Like you kind of fulfilled the measure of the creation, like you needed to? I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah. Anybody else been absolutely compelled to do something and deep in their bones, and they went ahead and did it? I think that's the seedbed of true entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship really is create something. In my case, I had to know that I had the time and the means to do it before I got started. And that's really where the story begins. So it started actually reading a book in high school, and I have it here. I did have it, I pulled it out. It's a nondescript book, a lot of people don't know it. And I did take it with both this at the bottom of the bag. Wow. It's about 100 years old. My mom had it. It was given to her in the 50s. It sat in our bookshelf. It's called Walden by Henry David Thoreau. You've never heard of it before or read it? Whoa, tell me. What do you know?
I have to read it for a class.
I can sign that. Sorry. I actually thought the books, first of all, H.G. Thoreau's one of the great authors, great writers in the history of the country. And so it's a little bit hard to read, given we're in 2000, whatever, he wrote the last time, like 1850. But anyway, the first chapter is called Economy. And this guy, out of the blue, decided that life, the way most people were living it, meant nothing hardly. And so he decided to get a few boards that he borrowed from a shanty, some nails, and he decided to walk out into the countryside and build a little lean-to at the foot of Walden Pond. By the way, if you're in Boston, you should really go there. It's pretty cool. They still have a replica of it.
Anyway, he started there, I think, 1845, and spent 26 months once he erected this little spot. And mainly farmed around it, got his own food, and then wrote about his experience. And really what he found out about was simplicity is probably a better way of life than trying to get a whole lot more than you really need. For whatever reason, it really spoke to me as a teenager. And I decided that I wanted to try and do something like that. I served the LDS mission in Alberta, Canada. There was an oil, it's kind of built on oil and gas, that province, and there was a problem in the early 80s. A lot of people kind of went under. And we were moving quite a few very wealthy people from their large mansions out to wherever they could survive. And I also noticed at the same time, I was really moved and inspired by people that lived, how should I say, small spaces, kind of a lamplight, maybe scriptures and good books around, feel love between them. They weren't hurried at all. And I think that locked in the notion that I really wanted to try to do this. So long story short, we did something. I got married at about 28. My wife was 20, Carrie. So she was impressionable and was willing to do maybe whatever I felt strongly about at the time. And by the way, the roles were reversed for sure. But my theory was if we live on half of our income, I think amazing things can happen. And so, not very many people try to do that, but we did, and we were aggressive about it, and we did live a simplistic lifestyle, saving half our income, and invested it for about 12 years straight. At the end of that period of time, we got to what's called the point of choice or the point of prosperation, at least I call it that, which is no matter if we worked or not, no matter if we got money, paid money or not, we can live forever, at least at the level that we were living at. And again, there's probably 4 hours to talk about financial strategies to do that. It's out there. There's actually a movement now called FIRE. Some of you may have heard of it. Financial independence, retire early. My object wasn't necessarily to retire early. I just wanted to have control of my time. We were having kids at the time. I didn't want an employer to tell me where I needed to be, when I needed to do what I needed to do with my kids at the time. So anyway, that would be a little bit of positive psychology because there's been a lot of studies done on money and happiness. So help me with this. Are we ready? Here we go. On this line, if we move further and further this way, we're spending more and more money on ourselves. On this line, as we move further and further this way, we're becoming happier, more enjoyable, flourishing in life. Where should I put the line? How should the line work there? We get somebody that knows a little bit about this, maybe. There's a lot of studies that's been out in the press quite a bit. Where you thought about this?
I just feel like your happiness as opposed to your circumstances and a lot of your attitude.
Okay. That's good. There's a truth to that. You haven't told me how to direct the line there. Given.
Declining.
You think it goes this way?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't put that up yet, but I like that thought. I've had that come up before. What else? Like a flat line, it doesn't matter. Okay. That's another thought. I appreciate it. Anybody have anything else they want to share about this? Yes, please, Wes Tanner.
I think there's a minimum now. You gotta meet some basic needs around it.
Right. Right.
But then above that, you don't have to
Okay.
finish your term.
In science and classical psychology, we're trying to stare down the barrel of who is really happy and why, and are there correlations. What we found with money worldwide, as we've done it in America, South America, Iceland, the very first bit of money you spend on yourself is incredibly satisfying and required. We've been taking a psychology class where you've heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's a sort of a lower level where initial needs are absolutely required before you can do anything else in life, right? So I'm talking about initial needs like food, shelter, clothing. So trust me, I traveled Europe one time with a backpack, spent all summer hanging out, and I had a certain amount of money, and the less I could spend, the longer I could be out there. So I was testing the theory. Could I actually go and spend a day with hardly spending anything or anything at all? So without food and shelter, I remember sleeping on a train. By the end of the day, it was horrific. Like I couldn't concentrate well. I didn't like any museums. I didn't like any cities. I mean, it's just I realized Food and shelter are pretty darn important. And like, you can't really do a whole lot else. So that's what we're talking about here. Initial needs, like the initial needs line. Let's say right here is the end of all your initial needs. Your food, shelter, clothing is pretty much paid for. Now what? Can we actually become happier by spending more on ourselves? It's tricky. It's tricky at this point. The answer is probably yes. Probably yes. For instance, if you're a massive reader and you love books, and you're able to have a little bit more to create your own personal library, something like that. Say you're an exerciser and you love biking. Biking's a big part of your morning, to have a bike. Those kinds of things probably add enduring happiness. And so now we get to here at this point. After that, there's almost zero correlation between money you spend on yourself and enduring that. In fact, what you normally see is a lot of stuff like this going on. I call them chocolate highs. It's just stuff that we as America, partly, I'm a marketer, I need to convince you that you need my service or product to be happy. And I've done a pretty good job, and so has America, and so has our economy. It's kind of based on it. And what happens is it's true for a few minutes to a few hours to a few days to a few weeks, depending on what it is. But because we're human, we adapt to anything that we don't need fairly quickly. And so you have a little chocolate high, it makes you happy for a second, then you adapt back, then you adapt back. It actually, and eventually it goes down when you're trying to do this. It goes down here and it goes down here, depending on what you're using for money, right? So if you actually had the cash, like I know the Huntsman family a little bit, the founders here, they live not too far from us. They actually bought 225 burial plots right next to in the cemetery. I found 2 for my wife and I, for their entire family forever. But anyway, it's cool. They have enough money where they can actually go out and kind of buy whatever they want. And so this is their line out here. They don't get into debt really for anything, or don't have to. And but even then, you buy the Learjet, you buy the really nice car, you get to a more massive house, you buy a 4th house in Europe. It's kind of cool. There's these chocolate highs, and even if you do it with cash, but eventually everybody realizes that's probably not their purpose for being here, because it's kind of empty, because you come back down and snap back to where you were before you adapt to it. Many of us, I shouldn't say us, some of you might be huntsmans, but most of us are more normal people, right? We make a normal amount of money, and a lot of us try to copy those kind of people. The only way we can kind of approach it is not to use cash because we don't have it. What do we use? Something that's very easy to get these days.
Credit card.
I can pull out a credit card maybe. I don't like them. I don't usually have them, by the way. I cut them up. But a lot of people are trying to adapt to that lifestyle, and they don't have the money, so they use credit. And what happens there is you still have these same things happen, but dissatisfaction starts happening pretty quickly. If you've ever gone into debt before and realized that you have to not only pay off the debt plus interest, and that's happening over and over again, and now you don't really like the product or service anymore, it doesn't matter to you, but that you're paying for the next 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years on it, it can be a really demoralizing life. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are depressed in our society, way more than maybe there has been in the past. It partly has to do with this, all right? So anyway, the other thing that we really haven't talked about or surveyed yet in positive psychology, and I think we should, is what if you got to this point or this point, and then you decided that everything else wasn't necessarily spent on self, but spent on serving others with what I call your signature strengths, with what you're best at, with what you're meant to do. And I'm positive, because I see all kinds of the happier people that do take whatever else they have and bless other people with it, that all of a sudden things are different. I mean, you're looking more like this. These are people that don't want to die anytime soon, if ever, because they feel like they're living a life above the earth, more of a heavenly existence. Partly because they're taking their means and being angels with it. And they feel like angels, and people feel like they're being served by angels, and they're out there. In my class, I bring some of these people to the class. And whether you're sleeping now or not, you'll be waking up very quickly and probably crying because of what they do. And this is the essence of a social entrepreneur that has a feeling and is compelled to do it because nobody else is doing it, and they're meant to do it, and the world changes because of it, in small ways or large ways. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, that's this. What happened with us, again, this is the other problem with America, is that if this is time going this way, and this is your income and your expenses, generally in this country, because of seniority pay and that sort of thing, our income usually increases over time. Now, sometimes we lose jobs, sometimes there's little hiccups, but generally we see something like this. And so immediately you think, okay, no problem with money, we're fine. That's not the problem usually. The problem is this next line, expenses. And I do get involved with a lot of people, many who you think are pretty wealthy because of what they drive or where they live. Sadly though, when I go to their balance sheet and their income statement and figure out, their savings and investments and whatever, the problem has been that their expense line has always been something like that. It's wrapped around their income line. And so no matter what they drive or how many vacations they go on or what they look like, they're in poverty, right? They're dead flat poor, and inside they know it, and they're living in a lot of stress. And usually it turns into marital problems and all kinds of other stuff. And it's partly because of credit. Because, think about it. I don't know if you guys are this way, but we know what our income is. And we know we can save like $200 every month. But all of a sudden, there's something that we're just compelled to get. It maybe costs $15,000, but it's only like $190 a month. We've been paid off in like 7, 8 years, whatever. And so, but guess what? I'm saving $200 a month, but I really want this badly. And I can kind of barely fit it in to my budget. And that's how it happens, right? We get more and more indebted for stuff, maybe that we don't need but want. And it means that we end up being like this. And so that's a really, really hard lifestyle to keep up. Usually people are mom, dad, they have both working jobs they don't want. Eventually I talk to all kinds of people. They're 50, 55, 40 years old. And they know now what they want. They know what they're meant to do. They know what brings them joy and happiness. And I ask them why they're not doing it. And they say the same thing every time. And it has to do with that. I don't have enough time. And I don't have enough money. And so I can't. And I have to remain in this job because if I went to what I really want to do, it pays like $20,000 less a year, and we're just barely scraping by now, right, because of this. So anyway, if you're religious or not, I know God doesn't want us to live this way, and I know it partly because when I go into any religion, I hear what they say about the wise handling of money, and they say basically the same thing. And certainly if you're involved with the LDS Church, a lot this is talked about. And what happens is your income's like this. And there's 4 major things that religions and people like Dave Ramsey always talk about. And if you live this way consistently, something magical happens with those lines. So the things are, don't get into debt. If you have to, make sure it's done minimally and get out of it as soon as you can. Live within your means, so your income is this and your expenses are below it. Save, and then at least in churches I'm familiar with, you pay an honest, grateful tithing, right? And the word tithe isn't used quite as much in other churches, but something like it. If you do that consistently, what happens is you immediately separate the lines, right? Your income's here and expenses are below it. And this is the savings piece right here. This is where all the magic happens, because when you end up saving and know how to invest it, if you take my class, we'll talk a lot about investing well in wise investments, not stuff where affinity fraud and too risky kind of happens, because that can happen sometimes. But with this, if you go and invest it over time, what happens is this really cool thing starts to grow from the ground. It's called income, passive income if you're an accountant, but income that comes from your investments. So if you're involved in rental spaces by chance, the stock market has dividends. There's just different things where income and appreciation occurs with the investment. But over time, as you're doing this consistently, this line increases faster than this line. And eventually what happens over time is these lines cross. So your income from investments become greater than your simplified, debt-free, Walden-esque, HD Thoreau lifestyle. No matter how many kids you have. I mean, it's not really, you think, the more kids I have, the more expensive. It might be a little more expensive, but not that much, and especially if you live simply. So long story short, this is the point that can change everything. And in my life, when that happened, I thought I could just do anything I wanted from then on. And I felt, this is the moment. This is the moment I felt absolutely compelled by a higher source, like I need to jump out and do this thing. And this thing ended up being, I feel like I need to share stuff that nobody talked to me about when I was 20, 21, 22, 23. Like stuff that I've learned now that needs to be shared. So I don't know if you know, but if I did get a master's degree in business at BYU, but usually to teach at universities, especially if you're bringing a class in, I mean, you need to be a PhD, you need to be kind of tight with those people. And I was asked just to come in to teach at a lecture like this a few times at BYU, and what happened was a lot of controversy and crazy stuff started happening with 200 people that were, 150 were in the class. And long story short, the dean of the program allowed me to actually teach some of the stuff in a class with another guy who was teaching leadership. And then from there, it turned into my own class, and then from there, it kind of got bigger and stuff and went to other schools. And it had a lot, it had something to do with this and how to do it, but it had a lot to do with who is really happy and why, and are there correlations. And the only reason why that happened was in 1998, there was a professor at University of Pennsylvania called Martin Seligman that decided that, let me write one more thing up here. Anybody in psychology? Raise your hand if you're in psychology. Nobody here yet? Do you have psychology as a major here on campus?
Yeah.
That's here, okay. So I'm gonna put a few numbers, -5, +5, and 0. And anyway, Martin Seligman had been a clinical psychologist for about 30 years. Clinical psychology, I know a lot more about it now as a bishop. But there are people, and maybe you've experienced this, where mentally and emotionally, life is draining, it's difficult, we're not thinking maybe properly, and so we feel depression, anxiety, and a whole lot more things. And so a lot of times we go to a psychologist, a counselor at that point, and as Martin Seligman described it, we've developed tools and some things that allow us to maybe move from a -3 on the mental emotional scale to a -1. And he goes, so we've reduced the tonnage of suffering. That's a great thing. I feel good about that. But we've missed the point. Like, why wouldn't we consider moving to the right side of 0 and figuring out therapies, things to do where kind of normal mental emotional people can become happier and feel like they're flourishing more in life. And that's when positive psychology got started in 1998. And since then, there have been hundreds and hundreds of books, thousands of studies done on maybe who is here or who has moved the most, say from a 1 to a 4. And do they have things in common? We call it correlation. So high levels of correlation, high amount of correlation. And my class really is based on looking at what's highly correlated and really digging down very deeply into how you and me can get better at all of those things. You have a handout, right? This handout, Living a Meaningful Life. So these are 12 factors of people that are flourishing in life that are highly correlated. Like if one thing we could do is I could have all of you think for about 15 seconds on who the happiest person you think you've ever known is. So just think about that just for a second or two. Who's the happiest person you know? Yes. Can you think of somebody that you thought, one of the happiest people, right? I mean, one of the people you can immediately comes to your mind, you can think of who that is. We feeling that way? Gunnison, baby. There's gotta be 1 or 2 people there. We're sort of enduringly happy, maybe more. Actually, I teach a little bit in prisons, and when I first went, I used to think that they're different. You know, they're more animalistic. And what I found out is they're me and you and everybody else, and we're one. And they had a few things go wrong, but they're very human. I first of all went to like maximum security and knocked on these plastic, not plastic, they look plastic, they're heavy heavy glass, and ask them if they wanted to pray. And most do. And when you ask them if they would, many will. And if not, they'll tell you what they want you to pray about. And immediately there's a bond there. So I love Gunnison, I love Salt Lake, maximum security prisons, whatever. It's, what is it?
Not all of it is prison.
Okay. Oh, no, not all of Gunnison. When I think of Gunnison being from Salt Lake or Seattle, like that's the one thing I think about. I know there's a pretty large prison there.
Probably not good.
Yeah, right. So anyway, these 12 things become really, really interesting to ponder and learn about. And we get very deep, like we might spend, on the last one, we spend about 8 hours talking about it and working through it. Number five is the most highly correlated of all, meaning if we went out and measured every one of yours happiest person and they allowed us to come talk with them, we give them a survey with 400 questions, we find out a lot about their lives. Well, we might pay them a little bit to do it, and then they'd be happy, they smile. Give them something to eat. But anyway, in the end, we're looking for things that are highly correlated, that we see over and over again. The most highly correlated is number 5. It's above 90%. It's above 90%. Number 5, they, meaning those who are flourishing the most or move the most towards 5, they have a plethora, a wide variety of meaningful relationships. And this means, what do I mean by a meaningful relationship? I mean, Russ and I have a relationship, but it's not like quite meaningful. We don't know each other well enough yet. I think it would be if we lived by each other. But a meaningful relationship is Russ calls me at 2 in the morning and he's in trouble. He doesn't need to say another word. The phone's hung up and I run. And vice versa. That's a meaningful relationship. And I can promise you that if you have none, your life is not very happy. In fact, you're probably struggling and you're in deep troubles a lot of times. This is where we get mass murders. They're isolated. They have nobody that they associate with at all at that level. You need at least one person that you can call at 4 in the morning that would come running and vice versa, right? And again, the happiest among us tend to have a wide variety of plethora in all areas of their life, from at work, at school, at play, at church, and family. And so I want to just share with you an example of what I'm talking about. And this is a great one. This is pure family. This is pure family. And by the way, I know enough about families to know it's not always this way. Like, families are volatile. And we can even think of our own families. We might have a really good relationship with one or two and a pretty bad one, and a horrific one with others, depending on sort of what happened. But in a perfect world, families will come running for each other. Brothers and sisters and parents. It's hard for me to talk about. But I want to show a little video. Occasionally in the military, there's surprises that happen. Some of you, anybody, military family at all? Anybody, parents? Okay. So I don't need to say anything more. Let's just play this and then we'll chat about it a little bit after. Can we turn the lights off too? It doesn't matter.
I think I can do it right here.
Can we? Thanks, Russ.
Allegheny High School, where his son Caleb is exercising, and he sneaks in. Caleb Lee, are you working hard? Let's go! Come on! Come on!
A moment 9 months in the making, timed perfectly.
luck, Vanessa. Oh. Wait a minute, he's not on the dunk team. Ladies and gentlemen, just returning from South Korea, Black Hawk Helicopter Crew Chief, Private First Class Brandon Calvi.
I thought it would happen.
Please make welcome back home, First Lieutenant.
In between innings, the Fanatic dance, and then all of a sudden, his mom, Yori, the lead, deployed in Southwest Asia.
Oh, Daddy. Oh,
Hey.
I'm coming.
Urban family, we have a special guest delivering tonight's game puck. Please direct your attention to the Coyotes.
Dad Roney, Dad Urban, Sergeant, surprising his mom and dad.
Is unbelievable. Take a look at that. That is a proud father right there.
Officer 3, Danny Pennington of the United States Army. Please welcome home Chief Warrant Officer 3, Danny Pennington of the United States Army. Danny, we would like to personally thank you for everything you do for this country.
All right. There's no way we can petition for more time, right? Because you guys have. You have to be.
I mean, you have some captain at lunch, so.
Okay, that's true. So 4 or 5 people. All right. You can feel kind of the essence of meaningful relationships and the importance of them, and sometimes families, right? We do enough in a family setting where we're sacrificing for each other that these feelings certainly can happen and should, and I hope they do. And when you become parents, I hope you engender that sort of feeling, because this is the essence of life, really. This is probably the most important thing as it relates to one's own enduring happiness. We then go on in the class to talk about actual things you can do to create more of them. Because it's not like we're all built necessarily to have instantaneous, meaningful relationships, they take time and effort. The people that are happiest tend to have some skills too in this area, right? So, for example, many of them are involved in their livelihood in blessing and serving with their gifts and strengths, with their specific gifts and strengths. There's something called Tobin Matthew, Chicago Nurse, right now, if it's okay. I mean, I'm wondering, I think it's a 2-minute video, so we can sneak underneath it. This can give you an idea. You really should be about right now learning what it is you're good at, what's meaningful, and what you love. And a combination of all those things usually leads to something like this that Tobin's doing. And Tobin he's a normal job, but watch how he does it, because he's taking his signature strengths and doing it. This is
At Chicago's Lurie Children's Hospital, compassion is more powerful than a locomotive.
I'm excited about it.
I'm Batman.
When we first met Nurse Tobin Matthew, he was leaping off the comic book pages to battle the evil forces of illness.
You're 37 years old, and you still dress up as a superhero.
I do. I can usually find some common ground because I love toys too.
Since our last visit, our super nurse has taken heroics to new heights, wearing nearly 80 different costumes, once even switching 5 times in one day, and keeping spirits up by crashing down as the Hulk, treating hundreds of patients like 10-year-old Talia.
Every nurse that I see is a superhero.
You like Nintendo?
16-year-old Darius Roby has been in and out of the hospital his whole life.
To forget you're in the hospital and to feel you're a regular kid, it's always a good feeling.
Making a kid smile and having a great conversation with them and making a hard day easier. I mean, there's nothing better than that. Look at you!
We met little Jameson Davis our last visit too. He is still battling kidney disease.
It's like having a second member of the family. Anything we need, he's right there.
Bridget Evans, who has spina bifida, has been treated by Tobin for nearly half of her 27 years. Tobin's inspiration helped lead her to working in the hospital too.
It's very hard to focus on the pain and the fear when someone comes in with such enthusiasm and such optimism.
It's okay.
The power of a positive attitude goes a long way to help the healing.
Yeah.
Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Chicago.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our
one buildable trait you can develop. You can actually figure out what it is you're meant to do, what becomes a calling. Most people live at the highest ends of enduring happiness. When you talk about their job, they never use the word job. They use the word calling or mission. And he definitely would. So it's a really important thing to do, or try to be more like that. Another one is, and this is buildable, gratitude. And so people that tend to have more of these deeper relationships than are happier share gratitude often, right? And one way to do it in our class, think of somebody you haven't properly thanked in your life. Okay, you thought of them? Okay. Sit down and write 3 paragraphs on what they mean to you and what they have done that's been made such a difference to you. Got it? Next thing, call them on the phone and ask if it's okay to come over and say hi. Got it? Walk over, make sure you're in a room together, and simply read the letter to them. I can tell you, it'll be a really, really moving experience. They'll share things back to you, and immediately you've developed a more meaningful relationship. If you make a habit of stuff like that, I promise you, you'll feel more and more gratitude for people. And lastly, I wish we could show this. Maybe we can talk about it with the group, but it helps to be good at conversations with people. And I have a great video that shows 10 rules to be a better conversationalist. And I would have you write all 10 down, and I would have you look at the 10 and say, which one do I want to improve in this week? And focus on that thing this week. And we're not trained a lot in conversations, but it's really, really helpful and important to listen better, to focus on the other person, to make sure that they know that you think they're unbelievable, you want to hear more and more about them. Those are the kinds of things that make stirring conversations and more deeply meaningful relationships. We've already gone over time. I wish we had another 24 hours, but we don't. So have a great one.